I was 8 when I realized the rats in the cellar were treated better than I was. At least they weren't whipped for stealing crusts of bread. At least no one called them a curse. My name is Liora Velantra, though in the house I was born into, I was only ever called the mistake, a servant's bastard. A shameful secret, a smudge on the reputation of Lord Thalen, Velantra, and his perfect little family. My mother, a handmaiden with sea-glass eyes and a quiet voice, died the night I was born. They said it was my fault, that my strange silver eyes were a curse from the moon god, that I stole her life before I ever learned to cry. So they locked me in the west cellar, not the servants' quarters, not even the stables. A cellar, dark, damp, infested. I lived with rotten rats and the ghosts of wine barrels long dried, while my half-sister Serafini, the daughter he wanted, was gifted silk robes and wind element tutors. I was given dirty linens and beatings for being seen. Your kind isn't welcome in noble blood. You should thank us for letting you live, her mother, Lady Virel, once told me. I didn't cry that time. I had long since learned it made no difference. When I turned 13, they remembered I existed again. Not for kindness, but because House Velantra had debts. They tried to sell me, marry me off to Lord of Varick of the Eastern Barons, a man 3 times my age with 7 dead wives and a reputation for flaying slaves alive. That was the day I ran. Or rather, the day I vanished. They thought I was dragged into the deadwood, that the curse had finally taken me, that the wolves had fed. But no, something else found me that night. And it spoke with a voice like ice cracking across water, something darker, twisted, that the shadows whisper promises your ears aren't meant to hear. You are mine, Moonblood, and I will make them regret ever touching you. They say the forest doesn't let anyone leave, that the moment you step past the tree line of the deadwood, your soul becomes something else. They were right. I remember the wind howling through gnarled branches like the cries of 1,000 dying women. I remember the pain in my legs, the iron taste of blood on my tongue, the bruises on my back from being thrown into the cart for Lord of Varich's collection. But they forgot to mention something. The forest chooses. And that night, it chose me. A stillness that reached into my ribs and cradled what was left of the girl I used to be. I remember the sound of my bare feet slapping against cold soil. I heard her, but most of all, I remember the silver glow. It called to me like a heartbeat, soft, steady, deep. It wasn't moonlight. It was her. I stumbled into a glade soaked in mist, and the cold disappeared. In its place, warmth, power. I didn't want to die like that. And then, you have suffered. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. My knees gave out. I didn't mean to run. I whispered hoarsely. No one should die forgotten.
The mist parted. A tree rose before me, twisted, silver-white bark glowing faintly, leaves shaped like feathers, and in its roots, a pool. A mirrored basin that showed not my reflection, but memories. Lady Virel spitting on me as a child. Seraphine pushing me down the stairs when no one was looking. My father's sneer when he said I should have been drowned at birth. I looked away, shaking. I'm nothing, I whispered. You were made to believe that. But I see what lies beneath. A figure stepped out of the mist. And they tried to kill you because they feared what you'd become. She was tall, faceless, wrapped in layers of moonlight and shadow. Her voice crackled with eternity. You are Moonblood. One of the last-born beneath the veiled eclipse. I trembled. What am I? She knelt before me, eyes, if she had any, burning into my soul. You are the storm they prayed never came. That night, I was reborn. The moonbound god gave me her blessing, no, her claim. Silver etched across my veins. My bones sang with ancient magic. The rot in my heart turned into steel. I stayed in the forest for years. I trained. I bled. My eyes, the curse they all spat at, became radiant sigils of power. And slowly, I learned to command what no one in the Empire had touched in 1,000 years. I grew. My skin turned pale like marble, my hair dark as ink. Starcall magic. I could bend the wind to howl names. Call down light from broken moons. Speak to beasts no human dared approach. And as I trained under the moonbound's guidance, I learned a truth that twisted like thorns in my heart. Seraphine had become the crown sorceress. Lady Varel was now Grand Magistress. My father ruled the Western Territories as Duke. The same people who had crushed me were now legends. Heroes of the Empire. While the world thought I was dead. Good. Let them celebrate while they still can. Let them raise statues to their lies. Because war is coming. And the only person who can stop it. They fell upon border towns like a plague, tearing through walls and flesh, devouring entire cities in a night. Is the daughter they left in the cellar. The rift split the sky above the northern wastes on the eve of winterfall. One moment, there was nothing. The next, crimson lightning tore through the heavens like the world itself was bleeding. From the wound came horrors, bone-plated beasts, winged shadows, creatures with too many mouths and too little fear. Sent letters begging for the gods to intervene while silencing every report that made them look weak. The Empire panicked. The mages failed. The crown's holy priests were the first to flee. And the nobility? Her voice, bored and honey-sweet, echoed in the chamber. They did what they always did. They held banquets. Pointed fingers. Called for conscripts. And in House Velantra, far from the burning borders, the once proud family feasted on sugared plums while the common folk wept. Seraphine sat at the head of the long oak table, her golden hair cascading over a gown worth more than most homes. The border is hours away by sky crystal. This will all be handled long before it reaches us. Lady Varel lifted her wine. Let the crown burn if it must. House Velantra will endure. My father, the great Duke Thalen Velantra, nodded. Besides, the moon-blood curse is long gone. That bloodline ended with the bastard girl. She probably starved in some ditch. If she didn't die of shame first. At the mention of me, Seraphine scoffed. They laughed. All of them. A warm, rich, ugly sound. And that was the exact moment the room went dark. I stepped forward. The sky crystal chandelier shattered above them. The walls trembled. And from the shadows. He growled low, and the air cracked like glass. Silver eyes glowing like twin moons. Black armor etched with celestial runes. Hair cascading like midnight fire. Behind me, wings spread, not my own, but my beast's. A draconic creature of myth and ash, formed of old starlight and forgotten vengeance. Seraphine's voice was a whisper, disbelieving. But, you died, I could feel their hearts seize. Liora? I lived, I said coldly. You just didn't care enough to look. The guards who once spat at my feet had already dropped their blades and dropped to their knees, shaking. Lady Varel stood slowly. How dare you come back here? You ungrateful thing. You should be rotting in the ground. I tilted my head. You can't, you're not allowed to have this power. The moon outside hung low and full, a silvery eye watching everything. I did rot. In your cellar. For years. But the rot made me strong. My father tried to bark a command, but no soldiers moved. I walked forward, slow, steady. The power in my blood pulsed through the stones beneath us. You begged the gods to protect you, I said. And they sent me. Seraphine trembled, tears streaming down her perfectly powdered face. I wasn't allowed to live. I let the silence drag until it suffocated them. And then, finally, I turned away. You're not worth killing, I said. Not yet. Lady Varel shrieked. You can't leave. You don't get to do this. I paused at the shattered doorway. I already did. And with that, I vanished into silver light, leaving the family that threw me away to drown in the one thing they never thought they'd feel. Last heir of the celestial accord. High daughter of the moon court. And your only hope, irrelevance. The imperial court had never been quiet. Not once. Not during war. Not during plagues. Not even when the old emperor choked on poisoned wine mid-toast. But now. Now the great hall was silent. Because before them stood the one name they had tried to erase from every record, every ledger, every noble bloodline, Liora Velantra, the bastard daughter of a minor duke. Except she no longer bore that name. I am Liora Moonbound, I said, my voice calm and absolute, echoing through the marble halls. They didn't bow. Not yet. They stared. Some in awe. Most in fear. The new emperor, young and trembling behind his golden circlet, opened his mouth as if to speak. But no sound came. The archmage of the crown, a man who once called moonbloods a heretical myth, stepped forward, robe stiff with enchantment, face pale. This is impossible. That line was broken. There hasn't been a moonblood born in 11 centuries, I finished for him. Yes. And yet here I am. The one you all tried to pretend didn't exist. The silence thickened. Behind me, my dragon, Caliph, let out a low snarl, eyes glowing with mirrored galaxies. And that's when the groveling began. Not from the emperor, no. But from the nobles who had the most to lose. The ones who remembered House Velantra. The ones who once laughed as I scrubbed floors and starved in the dark while their daughters braided Seraphine's hair and mocked my rags. Lady Aeroline of House Thorn stepped forward in full court gown, sinking into a low, trembling curtsy. Your Grace, she breathed. Please forgive our blindness. We were told you had died. If we had known, I stopped her with a look. You would have ignored me faster. Her lips trembled. That's not, spare me. The moment you saw my eyes as a child, you turned your head. Just like the others. I wasn't bitter. Dozens of lords, ladies, advisors, soldiers. All of them so small now. I was simply done. They're flawed and based on lies. I let my gaze drift across the hall. I've seen your armies. They'll break in a week. Gasps. I've seen your plans. Murmurs. And I've seen your hearts. They haven't changed. I took a slow breath, feeling the moonlight from the arched windows swirl into me like wind behind sails. You want my help? Then you'll accept my terms. The emperor nodded frantically. Anything, whatever you ask, Lady Moonbound. No, I cut in. Not lady. Not bastard. Not forgotten daughter. I stepped onto the dais, directly in front of the throne. I will lead your armies. I will stop the rift. But you will crown me queen of the second sky. Or I will leave you to rot in the ashes you so carefully prepared. They agreed, of course. In nights alone with nothing but hunger and hatred for company. In ancient runes carved into my bones. In whispered promises from a forest older than the empire itself. Because power speaks louder than bloodlines. Because when your cities are burning and your gods are silent, the girl you buried in chains starts to look a lot like salvation. And so the coronation was swift. Unearned by their standards. But mine? Mine was forged in pain. In fire. They dressed me in black velvet and moon steel. And when the crown touched my head, not gold, but silver laced with starlight, I felt no joy. Only purpose. They would kneel now, yes. But I would never forget that once, they left me in the dark. And now. I am the storm they prayed for. It had been 3 weeks since my coronation. 3 weeks since I walked into the imperial court and rewrote the power structure of an empire with nothing but my name and my scars. And in those 3 weeks, I hadn't heard a word from House Velantra. Not from my father. Not from Lady Varel. And especially not from Seraphine. I didn't need to. I already knew what they were doing. Plotting. Fuming. Scrambling. Because in one night, everything they built on my bones came crumbling down. And then, they arrived. The herald didn't announce them. They weren't even expected. I was in the middle of reviewing deployment plans with General Oralis when a sharp knock echoed through the war chamber. A trembling guard poked his head in. "Your Majesty. House Velantra is here." I said nothing for a moment. Let the silence weigh. Then, send them to the Hall of Judgment. The Hall of Judgment was a place for war criminals. Oathbreakers. Kings who failed their people. It was cold. Bare. Circular, with no throne, just a crescent of stone seats and a single elevated platform. I stood there in full regalia. Silver crown. Black robes woven with star silk. Sword of moonlight strapped to my hip. And when they entered, they looked like they'd aged decades. My father limped slightly from an old wound I didn't remember him having. Lady Varel was gaunt, her skin no longer smoothed with glamours, her hair streaked with gray. And Seraphine? She still looked perfect. Too perfect. Which meant she was crumbling inside. Her golden curls were pinned in a flawless twist, her gown gleaming with family colors. She had painted herself like a doll, something untouchable, unbothered. But her eyes gave her away. There was no smugness in them now. No disdain. Just a flicker of fear she couldn't quite smother. She hadn't come to gloat. She had come to beg. "Your Majesty," my father said, voice hoarse. "We are honored by your grace in receiving us." "I did not summon you," I replied coolly. "So this must be a plea. Physical abuse of a minor noble heir. Treason by concealment of a magical bloodline. Conspiracy to sell a noble to a foreign warlord. Shall I continue?" Lady Varel straightened, trying to find footing. "We come to offer loyalty. Our house is, your house is nothing," I said flatly. "Its lands are dust, its titles meaningless. Your reputation has withered the moment your crimes became known." She flushed with shame. "Crimes? Would you like the list?" I stepped forward, drawing out a sealed parchment with ancient royal sigils. "Neglect. Surely you didn't come all this way just to cower." Seraphine flinched. There it was. That crack in her perfect mask. I turned my gaze on her, letting silence drag for several long seconds. And then, softly, "Well?" She blinked, startled. "What?" "You're the one who always had something to say," I said, voice calm as still water. "Laughed when I bled. Stole my food and mocked my clothes." Her jaw tensed. Her hands curled slightly at her sides. "You called me filth. I was young, you pushed me down the stairs. I didn't know what you were," she snapped, and then quickly recoiled, realizing her voice had cracked. "You still don't," I said. The room went silent again. And then I said the words I had waited so many years to say, "Kneel." Her eyes widened. "What?" "I am your queen. By blood, by conquest, and by divine claim. You will kneel. Here. Now. Before everyone." Her pride screamed in the silence. But her reality was louder. Slowly, painfully, her knees hit the cold stone. She lowered her head. And I stepped forward, leaning close. "Do you remember what you said to me when I was 12? I murmured. "When I was begging for food after 3 days locked in the cellar?" Her lips quivered. "You said, dogs don't deserve bread. They get kicked or they die." She closed her eyes. "Now remember this, the dog you kicked built a kingdom." "I remember," she whispered. "Good," I said. And I walked away, leaving her kneeling in the cold. They stayed in the capital after the kneeling. Not by invitation. By desperation. House Velantra had no lands left. No coin. No alliances. The noble houses that once flattered them had scattered like rats once I exposed their crimes. They were pariahs now, tolerated only because I let them live. I never spoke to them directly again. Not a single word. But I made sure they saw me. Every time I rode through the palace corridors in ceremonial armor, radiant with moonlight. Every time I passed the throne room, discussing war plans with foreign kings and high priests, men and women who now begged for my insight. Every time a bard recited tales of the Moonblood Queen in the square, painting me in legend while the crowd wept or cheered. They watched it all. And every moment carved them open. Seraphine still tried to hold on to something. Dignity, maybe. Control. She volunteered for court duties, lesser ones now, sorting logistics or attending council meetings as a silent scribe. I let her. I wanted her to see what it was like to be invisible. To be beneath notice. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me. I'd done it with no help from the court, no army, just me, Caliph, and the magic they once called cursed. Not with hate. With ache. The high priest of the astral temple crowned me protector of the realms. Children threw crystal flowers at my feet. Survivors from rift border towns knelt before me, weeping and thanking me for saving their families. That lost, miserable look of someone who had once held everything, and now knew she'd never even hold my shadow. And then came the ceremony of the stars. The night we turned the tide. I had sealed the third rift. Banished an ancient horror using a spell lost since the first era. The people begged for a celebration. So we gave them one. In the moon garden above the capital, thousands gathered under silver lanterns and petals that glowed like starlight. And Seraphine? She stood at the edge of the garden. Alone. Dressed in blue, the color I used to beg to wear. She didn't approach. But she watched as I stood on that stage, smiling, the entire world cheering my name. And I saw it in her eyes, regret. So deep it looked like it hollowed her out from the inside. Not because she loved me. Not because she'd changed. But because she could have had a place in this light, and she threw it away. After the ceremony, Emily, my right hand and closest friend, approached me, handing me a goblet. She was watching again, she murmured, nodding discreetly toward the back. I know, I said, sipping calmly. You going to speak to her? I shook my head. No point. She only wants what she lost. Not who I am. Emily smirked. Good. Because who you are. She couldn't survive it. They say Seraphine eventually left the capital. No fanfare. No send-off. Just faded into the background like a shadow at sunrise. Some say she wandered from town to town, telling stories of the sister she once knew, half false, half pitying. Others say she joined a cloister far in the north, where no one would know her name or her shame. As for me, I became more than queen. I became a myth. Because I didn't just survive. I rewrote the world. And the best revenge? Was that they had to live long enough to see it happen.